to the Women's History Museum for inviting me. Someone reminded me that I once said I'm such a fan of the museum and its efforts that I said, whatever you need, anytime you need it, you pick up the phone and call. They said, I'm going to start to regret it. I certainly don't tonight, but perhaps down the road. But it's a true honor to be here, and I'm so excited for this discussion. I'm just going to say really quickly a little bit about myself, because I get this sometimes when I write about issues that have to do with history, and people say, you know, what do you know? You didn't go through what a lot of people of previous generations went through. What do you have to say about the Civil Rights Movement? And the short answer to that is, I didn't go through what my parents went through. I will never know what it's like to have gone to a segregated school, which is something both of my parents experienced. My mother was harassed regularly and called the N-word on a daily basis, until the day she actually decided to deck the boy who was doing it, who'd been bullying her. And the extraordinary story that sort of, I think, tells people who say, you know, how can you go on TV and argue with these people or let these men say these mean things to you on air? And I say, because I'm my mother's daughter. She decked that bully, and when she went to the principal's office, and they were talking to the white principal, and he says, she hit me, and my mother says, well, he's been calling me the N-word for the last week every day. And the principal says, is that true? And this is the South, and this is a white male principal. And the boy said, yes, it's true. I have been calling her that. And he said, okay, I can't stop you from doing that, but I'm also not going to stop her from hitting you. So that's the kind of mother I come from. That's one of the reasons I care about these issues, because I will never forget what my parents went through, so I could sit on this stage right here today. And as a reminder of that, on my laptop, the screensaver I have was the Richard Avedon photo of Julian Bond, Diane Nash, and the other people of SNCC. And it's what I see every day I turn on my computer. And it reminds me that no matter how bad my day is, it's not nearly as bad as what they went through, so I can have the right to sit at that laptop and write the columns I do today. So, thank you for being here. And I'd like to open it up to both of our experts if you have any opening remarks or thoughts on these topics.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Dr. Chapman, and thank you to the National Women's History Museum and everyone. I'm very excited to be here, and I just can't help myself. You know, when I was in 3rd grade, I was called names. I grew up in Yonkers, New York, and my mother actually came to the school and gave the children a history lesson. She sat them all, made them all come in a circle, and gave them a lesson on race relations in the 3rd grade. I didn't have any more problems after that. But my job today is for the panel is to give you a little bit of historical context for our discussion. And I wanted to, so I thought about how in very short, because this will be a very short sort of opening salvo, hopefully, to reflect the themes and the points of the program. So what I decided to do was to think about one really major historical event that has lots of connections to the past and to the present. And it's not comprehensive, so I'm just going to lightly touch on a couple of things that someone interested may want to follow up with questions. And certainly it's representative rather than comprehensive. So let me just talk about a historical event that I always love to reimagine in my mind, and it takes place right here in Washington, D.C. In 1896. I'm going to read it though, so I'll be succinct. The year was 1896. The place, and the 19th Street Baptist Church, which on a sweltering day in July was filled with African-American women activists who had come to create the first national black women's organization in the country's history, the National Association of Colored Women, NACW. Quote, it was a famous gathering of famous women, noted one of the attendees, Rosetta Douglas Sprague, an activist and daughter of the abolitionist and statesman Frederick Douglass. Already famous was the NACW's first elected president, Washington, D.C. resident Mary Church Terrell, whose life epitomized change. 17 years after her election, she was asked by the newly formed sorority at Howard University, Delta Sigma Theta, to lead them in the Great Women's Suffrage Parade down Pennsylvania Avenue in 1913, at a time when the mainstream white women's organizations were determined to exclude black women. The sorority was the second such organization that was founded. The first was Alpha Kappa Alpha, established in 1908. I know I have to do both. Established in 1908, and both entities, as well as other organizations and sororities after them, took the NACW as their model, particularly its values around education. In fact, at a time when Booker T. Washington's industrial education in the trades had gained ascendancy, it was the desire and the determination of black students to be scholars in the liberal arts tradition that was the motive for the founding of the black Greek letter organizations, including those of the guys. 40 years later, after that parade, Terrell could be seen on picket lines with her cane and hearing aid. She was 90 years old at the time, in 1953, and a leader of a group of activists determined to desegregate Washington, D.C. And over the course of 3 years had marshaled national and indeed international support for the monumental 53 Thompson Supreme Court case that upheld previous anti-discrimination laws in the city and effectively desegregated Washington. During the course of that historic 1896 meeting, the women also paid tribute to those who had come before them: Phyllis Wheatley, Margaret Garner, Sojourner Truth. But they were fortunate to have among them the great abolitionist Harriet Tubman, who was there at this meeting in 1896 and then in her 70s. Tubman had escaped from slavery in 1849 and led hundreds of others to do so, most spectacularly as the only woman to lead a military campaign. In the spring of 1863, when Union troops were poised to sail their gunboats from Beaufort, South Carolina, up the Combahee River to torch some strategic plantations, Tubman had gotten intel from fugitive slaves about where the Confederates had placed explosives on the riverbanks. As a result, the gunboats completed the raid unscathed